Hi everyone, this is Dr. Nuck, and we're gonna be learning about solving quadratic equations in quadratic form today. Let's first recall what the quadratic equation was. Quadratic equation is an equation of the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals to 0. Now in this section, we're gonna be giving an equation. Now our job is to try to make that into a quadratic equation so that we can solve it by factoring, completing the square, or by using the quadratic formula. I think the best way to learn this is doing a bunch of examples, so let's get started. Let's try something like this. Solve 6x to the fourth minus 7x squared plus 2 equals to 0. Now notice that this equation does not start out with something x to the second power. So our job is to make the highest exponent into 2. So right now you're given degree 4 here. Our job is to make that into a degree 2 somehow. So let's just look at x to the fourth. Is there any way that I can write x to the fourth in terms of something to the second power? I think so, because look, is this true? X to the fourth is x squared, because remember you multiply those exponents. So if I let u equals to x squared, then do you see that u squared is going to be x to the second power, which is going to give us x to the fourth. So that's pretty much the trick that we need to apply for this section. So let's take a look at the example 1, and let's try to rewrite this by using the U substitution. So notice that if I I'm going to start out like this, let u equals x squared. Then do you see that we can rewrite this equation as 6x squared to the second, but x squared is nothing but our u. And then here I'm going to rewrite it as 7 and then x squared. I don't know why I put the parentheses there, but oh well. Plus 2 equals to 0. But the thing is, x squared is our u. So this is going to be our u. So if I rewrite this in terms of u, then we're going to have 6u squared minus 6u plus 2 equals to 0. Now let's step back a little bit and stare at this equation for a little bit. Isn't this nothing but a quadratic equation? Because it has of the form a u squared minus 7u plus 2 equals to 0. So what we're going to do first is we're going to try to solve this equation. And there are a couple ways or few ways that we can do. You can factor or complete the square or apply the quadratic formula. To me, easiest way to do this is by factoring. So that's what I'm going to do. So here what we're going to get is, let me see, a, c, and then b. So a times c is 6 times 2, which is going to give us 12. And then our b is negative 7. So let's determine the side numbers. So whatever the two side numbers are, if I multiply, I better get 12 back. And then if I add, I better have negative 7 back. So let's first determine the sign. Now, if the product, or when you multiply the two, it has to be positive 12. So it's either you have to multiply positive times the positive or the negative times the negative. But the thing is, when you add those two side numbers, it better add up to a negative. So do you see what sign that we're going to have to pick? Yes, both negatives. Okay, so let's try to come up with what times what's going to give us positive 12. And if I add those side numbers, I'm going to get negative 7. How about 3 and a 4? Would that work out? Is negative 3 times negative 4, is it positive 12? Yep. Negative 3 plus negative 4, does it give us negative 7? Yes. Okay, now as a side work, I'm going to try to factor that quadratic equation. So let me just rewrite it like this. So I'm going to write it as side work. 6u squared minus 7u plus 2 equals to 0. Or actually, let me just factor this. All right, so then we're going to have to rewrite this as 6u squared and then minus 3u and then minus 4u and then plus 2. I forgot the equal sign. All right, now from here, we're going to do this by factor by grouping. Group up the first two and then group up the last two. Now, what's the greatest common factor from the first two? I think that's 3u. And then what goes in the parentheses? 3u times what is going to give us 6u squared. That's 2u. And then if I have a minus 1 here, then 3u times minus 1 will give us minus 3u. So this looks good. Now, you need to, next step, drop down this minus sign. Now be careful on the sign next. So for the next two terms, I believe that the greatest common factor is 2. But notice that we have the minus sign in the front of it. So you're going to have to ask yourself, minus 2 times what is going to give us minus 4u? Isn't it positive 2u? Because look, if I distribute the minus 2 to 2u, then you're going to have minus 4u. So it makes sense. And then the next term has to be plus 2. If I distribute the negative 2, so it has to be minus 1. Does it make sense? If I distribute this, you're going to have minus 4u. And if I distribute this negative 2 to 1, I'm going to have plus 2. So I think this is good to go. Now let's take a look at these two factors. And what do they have in common? Yep, 2u minus 1. So I'm going to factor out the 2u minus 1. And then the rest of it is 3u minus 2. So we just factor our 6u squared minus 7u plus 2. So now I'm going to go back to where we left off, and I'm going to rewrite this as 2u minus 1 and times 3u minus 2 equals to 0. Awesome. So now this implies that 2u minus 1 is 0, or 3u minus 2 is 0. So I'm going to solve this separately. So for 2u minus 1, if I want to solve for u, I need to add 1 first to get 2u equals to 1. Then I need to divide it by 2. So now we have u equals to 1/2. Okay, but look at the original equation. The original equation was in terms of x, right? So what we need to do now is to convert our u back into x. So let's go back. What was our u? Well, our u was x squared, wasn't it? So I'm going to replace our u with x squared equals to 1/2. Let me just extend this dotted line. Okay, now from here, how are we going to solve for x? Yes, we're going to have to apply the square root property. So if I take the square root on both sides, then don't forget that plus or minus. So this means that our x is going to be plus or minus the square root of 1/2. Okay, so that implies that we're going to have x equals to plus or minus square root of 1 is 1, and then square root of 2 is just square root of 2. And of course, we always have to rationalize this, so multiply the top and the bottom by the square root of 2. Then here you're going to have x equals plus or minus square root of 2 over 2. So I'm just going to box that for the answer for now. All right, one side is done. Now let's go to the other side. 3u minus 2 equals to 0. So first I need to add 2. Then you're going to have 3u equals to 2. Easy peasy. Dividing by 3. Then you got u equals to 2/3. Do not panic. It's just because that's a fraction. No big deal. All right, now we need to replace our u with x squared because we're substituting u equals to x squared. Now we take the square root on both sides by applying the square root property. Then here you're going to have x equals plus or minus the square root of 2 over 3. So this implies that we're going to have plus or minus the square root over the square root of 3. But we need to rationalize. So let me just write this nicely. Oops. All right, rationalize time. So here you're going to multiply here by the, root 3 over root 3. So that looks like what we're going to get is x equals plus or minus the square root of 6 all over 3. Let me just box that for the answer for now. Now, in this section, it is really, really important that you check your solutions because some solution may not be the official solution. So let's check. I'm running out of room. All right, so let me just go over here. Let's check when x equals to root 2 over 2. I'm going to plug that back into the original equation, and then we're going to have 6 root 2 over 2 to the fourth minus 7 root 2 over 2 squared plus 2. Now the question is that going to add up to 0? All right, so we got this. So this implies that we're going to have 6 times, now remember, square root is same thing as the exponent being 1/2. So here you're going to have 2 to the 1/2 to the fourth over 2 to the fourth. And the next one you're going to have minus 7, and then 2 to the 1/2 to the second power all over 2 to the second. And then here comes our plus 2. So let's keep working. So this same thing as 6 times 2 to the 4 over 2, so it's 2 squared, which is going to be 4. And then 2 to the fourth is 16. And then here you're going to have minus 7. And you're going to have 2 to the 1/2 to the second power, so you're going to have 2 to the first, which is 2 over 4. And then plus 2. Oh goodness, I'm running out of room. So let me just go over here. Okay, then it looks like we're going to have 6 times. Let me just reduce that fraction a little bit. 4 goes into 4 once, into 16 4 times. And then minus 7 times 2 over 4 is same thing as 1/2, and then plus 2. We got this. So now we have 6 over 4 minus 7 over 2, and then plus 2. Now let's reduce the 6 over 4 into 3 over 2. And then minus 7 over 2, and then plus 2, same thing as 4 over 2. Is that right? Yeah. Now what? 3 minus 7 is minus 4, so let me just show every step. 3 minus 7 plus 4, whole thing dividing by 2. All right, ready? So, 3 minus 7 is minus 4, minus 4 plus 4 is 0 over 2, which will give us 0 back. So square root of 2 over 2 is our solution. Now, if I have to check when x equals to negative root 2 over 2, do you see that we're going to get the same result? Because if I raise negative to the fourth power and a second power, they both become positive. So just to save our time, I'm going to include x equals to negative root 2 over 2 as part of our solution. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to check when x equals to, do we get root 6 over 3? All right, so let's take a look. So our equation was, let me just write it on top, 6x to the fourth minus 7x squared plus 2, right? Equals to 0. Okay, so I'm going to plug that value of x into the equation. So 6 times root 6 over 3 to the fourth minus 7 times root 6 over 3 to the second plus 2. Is that going to give us a 0 back? So this is the question. All right, so then this implies that we're going to have 6 times 6 to the 1/2 to the fourth power over 3 to the fourth minus 7 times 6 to the 1/2 to the second over 3 to the second, and then plus 2. So I'm going to keep working it vertically. So this is same thing as 6 times 6 to the 4 over 2, so which will give us 6 to the second power all over 3 to the fourth. Again, I'm doing this step by step by step. So if you can do this in your head, you don't have to show me all these steps. So now you're going to have 7 times, you're going to have 6 to the first power, whole thing over 3 to the second power, and then plus 2. Okay, we got this. So 6 times 6 squared is same thing as 6 to the third. So if I multiply 6 3 times, what do we get? 216. Now 3 to the fourth is 81. And then minus 7 times 6. Oh, I should have done that. So 7 times 6 is what? 42. Let me just erase this. Put a 42 there. And then 3 squared is 9. And then plus 2. Yikes. Okay, So now let's try to rewrite this. So 216 over 81, that's going to reduce to, what is that, 8/3. And then minus 42 over 9, that's going to reduce to 14 over 3. And then plus 2, so 2 is same thing as 3 times 2, so which will be what goes on the numerator, 6. Hi. All right, so now we got 8 minus 14 plus 6, whole thing dividing by 3. Okay, almost there. What's 8 minus 14? That's minus 6 plus 6. Yay! This is going to be 0 over 3, which is going to give us a 0 back. Okay, now as the same argument, when we check when x equals the negative square root of 6 over 3, do you see that we're going to get the same result because we're raising negative square root of 6 over 3 to the eventh power. So this checks as well. So therefore, it looks like we get to keep everyone as part of our solution set. So what was it? Square root of 2 over 2, negative square root of 2 over 2, and then square root of 6 over 3, and then negative square root of 6 over 3. So we got 4 solutions here. Now let's take a look at something like this. Solve whole quantity x minus 5 squared plus 6 times the quantity x minus 5 plus 8 equals to 0. Now our job is to make this into a quadratic equation, which is something of the form u squared plus something times u plus 8 equals to 0. Can you guess what the u is going to be? Well, if I let u equals to the whole quantity x minus 5, then I can rewrite the original equation as u squared plus 6u and then plus 8 equals to 0. Alright, now from here, you can either factor, complete the square, or apply the quadratic formula, but I think this is factorable, so let me see. I better have a u and a u plus plus. Oops, that's a plus. How about what times what equals to 8? How about 2 and a 4? I think this works because if I FOIL this, you're going to have, let me see, u squared plus 4u plus 2u and then plus 8, which will give us u squared plus 6u plus 8. Okay, so this is good to go. So this implies that either u plus 2 is 0 or u plus 4 is 0. Now again, I'm going to solve these two equations separately. So this implies that u is negative 2. Let's just try to take care of this side first. But u was x minus 5, wasn't it? So this means that x minus 5 equals to negative 2. Now we're going to add 5 to get x equals to 3. So this is our proposed solution. Now let's go with u plus 4 equals to 0. So if I subtract 4 from the both sides, you're going to have u equals to negative 4. Alright, so, but u was x minus 5. So we have x minus 5 equals to negative 4. Adding the 5 on both sides, we're going to have x equals to 1. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to check. So let's do it. Alright, so when x equals to 3, we're going to plug that value into the original equation. So the question is 3 minus 5 squared plus 6 times 3 minus 5 plus 8, is it going to equal to 0? Alright, we got this. So we get negative 2 squared plus 6 times negative 2 plus 8. Now negative 2 whole quantity squared is 4, and then 6 times negative 2 is minus 12, and then plus 8. Alright, 4 minus 12, that's negative 8 plus 8, and which equals 0, which matches up with this 0. So therefore, x equals 3 is going to be our solution. Now let's check when x equals to 1. Alright, so I'm going to plug this back into the original equation. So let's go with 1 minus 5 squared plus 6 times 1 minus 5 plus 8. Is that going to equal to 0? All right, so let's work it. So this implies that we're going to have negative 4 squared plus 6 times negative 4 plus 8. So this implies you're going to have positive 16 minus 24 and then plus 8. Now this means that, what do we get? 16 minus 24 is negative 8 plus 8. I believe that we're going to get 0. So it checks. So therefore, our solution set in this case is 3 and a 1. And here's our answer. Now we still have to check when x equals to 2. Now let's take a look at something like this. Solve 8x to the negative 2 minus 10x to the negative 1 plus 3 equals to 0. So again, our job is to try to rewrite this in quadratic form. So let's take a look at x to the negative 2. So isn't it x to the negative 2? Isn't it same thing as x to the negative 1 to the second power? Because you're going to have to multiply those exponents together. So what we're going to do is this. I'm going to let u equals to x to the negative 1. Then x to the negative 2 can be written as u to the second. Hopefully you're seeing that okay. But let me just rewrite. So I'm going to say let u to be x to the negative 1. Don't worry, I'm going to write every single step. So this implies that the original equation can be rewritten as 8x to the negative 1 squared, because that will give us x to the negative 2, and then minus 10 times the x to the negative 1, and then plus 3 equals to 0. So now if I use u in terms of x, then here I can rewrite this as 8u squared minus 10u plus 3 equals to 0. Now, is this factorable? I think so. All right, so let's check. We're going to try to factor this. I'm going to go a c and a b. So a times c, positive 24. b is negative 10. All right, now our job is to determine those two side numbers. Now, if I multiply those two side numbers, it has to be positive 24. So the sign must be either positive, positive, or negative, negative. But the thing is, if I have to add those sign numbers, it has to add up to a negative 10. So in this case, our sign has no choice but to be negative. All right, so let's try to come up with the number. How about 6 and a 4? Does that work? All right, let's check. Does negative 6 times negative 4, is it going to give us positive 24? Yes. Negative 6 plus negative 4, it will give us negative 10. Good. So let's factor. So 8u squared minus 10u plus 3. I'm going to rewrite this as 8u squared minus 6u minus 4u and then plus 3. Group up the first two, group up the last two. Now the greatest common factor from the first two terms is 2u. And then here you should have 4u minus, what is that? 2u times what gives 6u? 3. All right, now I'm going to drop down this minus sign. Now let's look at the next one. 4u and 3. Well, there's no common factor. So what we need to do is we need to rewrite this as negative quantity. 4u, because look, if I distribute this negative to 4u, then you'll have negative 4u. And then for the next term, I need to have a positive 3. Since I have a negative sign in the front of the parentheses, this sign has to be minus and then 3. So because if I multiply this, you have negative 3, which will become positive 3. So we're good to go. Now, what do they have it in common? These two terms, what do they have it in common? 4u minus 3, isn't it? So I'm going to factor out the 4u minus 3. Now, what's the rest of it? Be careful. There's that invisible 1 sitting there, right? So the rest of it is going to be 2u and then minus 1. So we just factor that. All right, I'm going to rewrite this now as 4u minus 3 and then 2u minus 1 equals to 0. Looking good. So this means 4u minus 3 is 0, or 2u minus 1 is 0. So adding 3 to both sides, here you're going to have 4u equals to 3. Sorry, I shouldn't skip any steps. Here we go. And dividing by 4, you're going to have u equals to 3 over 4. But the thing is, our original equation was in terms of x. So now what we need to do is you're going to have to go back and replace our u with x to the negative 1. So this implies that we're going to have x to the negative 1 equals to 3 over 4. Now, there are a couple ways that you can go from here, but I like this way better. Remember, x to the negative 1 is same thing as 1 over x to the first. So I'm just going to rewrite this as 1 over x equals to 3 over 4. Now cross multiply, then here what we're going to get is 3x equals to 4. So x equals to 4/3. Alright, now let's work on 2u minus 1 equals to 0. So I'm going to be adding 1 to both sides to get 2u equals to 1. Dividing by 2, u equals to 1/2. But u was x to the negative 1. So I'm going to rewrite it as x to the negative 1 equals to 1/2. And I'm going to rewrite x to the negative 1 as 1 over x equals to 1/2. Now cross multiply. 1 times x is just x. 1 times 2 is just 2. So we're going to get x equals to 2 as our proposed solution. Now we check. All right, let's go over here. Check when x equals to 4/3. I'm going to plug this back into our original equation. So here you're going to get 8 times 4/3 to the negative 2 minus 10 times 4/3 to the negative 1 plus 3. Now the question is that going to equal to 0? This is what we need to ask. So let's first try to simplify this guy. I'm going to bring it over here. Alright, so remember if I had something like y to the negative 2, that's same thing as 1 over y squared, wasn't it? So to pretend that y is 4/3. So then we're going to have 4/3 to the negative 2 is going to be 1 over 4/3 squared. Okay, so that's same thing as what? 1 over 4 squared over 3 squared, which is 1 over 16 over 9. So now, remember, this is telling you that this expression is same thing as 1 divided by 16 over 9. So 1 divided by 16 over 9 now is not same thing as 1 times 9 over 16. So here what we're going to get is 9 over 16. Okay, so let me just try to rewrite that. So we're going to now have 8 times 9 over 16, oh, not squared, just 9 over 16, and then minus 10. Now we're going to do the same thing to this guy. Okay, if I bring this over here, again, y to the negative 1, let me just separate this. All right, y to the negative 1 is same thing as 1 over y. Now pretend that y is 4/3. Then 4/3 to the negative 1 becomes 1 over 4/3, which is same thing as 1 divided by 4 over 3. So this is same thing as 1 times 3 over 4, which is going to give us 3 over 4. So here I can write this as minus 10 times 3 over 4 and then plus 3. Now let's keep checking. I could reduce the 8 and the 16. 8 goes into 8 once, into 16 twice. So we have 9 over 2. And then minus, now let's go with 10 times 3 over 4. Well, I think 2 goes into 4 and a 10. So 2 goes into 4 twice, into 10 5 times. So what's left over? 5 times 3 is 15 and over 2. And then plus 3. Well, 3 can't be written as a denominator of 2, so multiply the top and the bottom of 3 by 2, 2 over 2, then the top is going to be 6. So what do we get? We have 9 minus 15 plus 6 all over 2. Now, 9 minus 15 is minus 6 plus 6 over 2, 0 over 2, 0. Yes, it checks. So 4/3 is a solution to this equation. Now let's check for x equals to 2. All right, So we got 8 times 2 to the negative 2 minus 10 times 2 to the negative 1 plus 3. Is that going to equal to 0? All right, let's do it. So this is same thing as 8 times 1 over 2 squared minus 10 times 1/2 and then plus 3. I'm just going to put an arrow right here. So this is same thing as 8 over 4 minus 10 over 2 is just 5, isn't it? 5 plus 3, which is same thing as 8 over 4 is 2. 2 minus 5 plus 3, that's minus 3 plus 3. Yay, it's 0. So therefore, it looks like we get to keep both of them. We will keep both. So 4/3 and 2 are the solution to this equation. All right, now let's take a look at something like this. Solve x to the 2/3 minus 2 times x to the 1/3 minus 24 equals to 0. So again, we need to rewrite this in terms of a quadratic equation. So let's take a look. So let me just try to rewrite x to the 2/3 into something squared. Okay, can you tell me what goes in? So x to the what power to the second power is going to give us 2/3? Well, that's 1/3, isn't it? So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to let u equals to x to the 1/3. Therefore, x to the 2/3 becomes u to the second power. So let me rewrite this as let u to be x to the 1/3. Now I'm going to rewrite the original equation in terms of u. But before I do that, let me just rewrite it like this. X to the 1/3 to the second power minus 2 times x to the 1/3 minus 24 equals to 0. But u is x to the 1/3, so we get u squared minus 2u minus 24 equals to 0. Now, is this factorable? So let's check. Better have a u and a u. Sign's going to be plus or minus. What works? 6 and a 4. So how about negative 6 and then 4? Would that work? So let's check real quick. So we have u squared and then minus 6u plus 4u and then minus 24. You got u squared minus 2u minus 24. Yep, so this is correct. All right, so let's keep going. So that implies that u plus 4 is 0 or u minus 6 is 0. So we have u equals to negative 4, and then our u was x to the 1/3. So we have x to the 1/3 equals to negative 4. Do not panic, we got this. Now I need to solve for x, so that means that I need to get rid of that 1/3. So what do? We need to raise both sides by 3, because x to the 1/3 to the third power will give us just the x back. So this implies that we got x equals to negative 4 to the third power. So which implies that x is going to equal to negative 64. So let me box that for the answer. Now let's check the other side. U minus 6 equals to 0. So that implies that u equals to 6. But u was x to the 1/3. So we got x to the 1/3 equals to 6. Now we're going to do the same thing. We want to get rid of that 1/3 power, so we need to raise both sides by 3. So what we're going to get is x equals to 6 times 6 times 6. What is that, 216? All right, so these are our proposed solutions. Now we check. All right, so let's check when x equals to negative 64 first. Okay, so the question is negative 64 to the 2/3 minus 2 times negative 64 to the 1/3 minus 24, is it going to equal to 0? All right, so we can do this. Do not panic. All right, so let's take this one step at a time. So note that I'm going to work this as a side work. So let me just work this guy over here. Okay, so if I have negative 64 to the 2/3, this is exactly the same thing as the cube root of negative 64 to the second power. Okay, so for sure what's in the parenthesis is going to be negative because you got a cube root of negative 1, which is going to be negative 1. So now what we need to do is we need to break down that 64. So 64 is 8 times 8, 2, 4, 2, 4, and then 2, 2, and then another 2, 2. So the 64 can be written as 2 to the, how many 2's do we got going on? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2 to the 6. All right, so we now have negative cube root of 2 to the 6. Okay, let me just work this step by step. So here we're going to have negative. Now, cube root of 2 to the 6 can be rewritten as 2 to the 6 over 3. Remember? Bottom is the root, top is the power, and then whole thing squared. So, which means that we're going to have negative 2 to the second power to the second power. All right, do not freak out. Now, let's focus what's in the parentheses here. Okay, now let's focus on that little 2, exponent 2. There's so many 2's going on, I know. Now notice that this 2 is only attached on the base 2, not on the negative sign. So if I have to work this step by step, this means that we're going to have negative 4 now to the second power. I hope you can follow that. So let me just write it like this. All right. So, which means that we're going to have negative 4 times negative 4, which is going to give us positive 16. Okay, so what we now have here is positive 16 minus 2 times, oh crap, we still have to simplify this portion. Negative 64 to the 1/3. But I think we can do that one pretty quickly. So let me just change the color. Let's work on negative 64 to the 1/3. Okay, so I'm gonna bring this guy over here as a side work. All right, we're gonna do the same thing. So isn't this same thing as the cube root of negative 64 to the first power? So I'm just gonna leave it like that. Then I know for sure that we got the cube root of negative, so this portion is gonna become negative, and then cube root of 64. So which gives us negative cube root of, well, 64 was 2 to the 6. We just computed that earlier. So this is same thing as negative. And then here you're going to have a 2 to the 6 over 3, which gives us negative 2 to the, remember, 6 over 3 is only attached on the 2, not on the negative 2. So let me just try to stress that portion out. Well, before I do that, let me just try to rewrite that in terms of simplified form. So 6 over 3 is 2, isn't it? Okay, so again, this 2 is only attached on base 2, not on the negative. So in this case, what we're going to get is just drop down the negative, and then 2 squared is 4. All right, so now I'm going to bring this back into our equation. So we got 16 minus 2 times negative 4, and then minus the 24. Okay, we got this. So this is going to be 16, and then plus 8 minus the 24. Let's cross our fingers. 16 plus 8 is 24. 24 minus 24, boom, yes, it's 0. So it checks the same value here. So we get to keep x equals negative 64 as part of our solution. Now let's check x equals to 216. Let's do the same thing. So we got 216 to the 2/3 minus 2 times 216 to the 1/3 minus the 24. Is that gonna equal to 0? All right, let's work on this side. Okay, so we got so much work to do, right? But we got this. So let's first compute 216 to the 2/3. So let me just work this maybe over here. Sorry if this is getting too messy. I hope you can follow my work. So here we're gonna have 216 to the 2/3, which is same thing as cube root of 216 whole thing to the second power. Exactly the same thing. Now, the 216 can be broken down into, so let me see, 216. So 2 is going to go in. And 2 times 108 gives us 216. 108 is even, so 2 is going to go in. So 2 times 54. So 54 is same thing as 2 times 27. And the 27 is same thing as 3 times 9. And then 9 is 3 times 3. Oh my goodness. Look at that side work. All right. Like it's literally side work. It's slanted. Sorry. So anyway, so looks like 216 is 2 to the, how many 2's? 1, 2, 3. Is that right? 2 to the third. And then 3 to the third. So this becomes cube root of 2 to the third times 3 to the third, whole thing squared, which is going to give us just 2 times 3, whole thing squared, which gives us 6 squared, which is going to be 36. Again, you don't have to show me all this work. I'm just trying to do everything step by step by step, okay? So we now can rewrite this as 36 and then minus 2 times 216 to the 1/3. All right, let's work this as a side work. I'm gonna bring this guy over here. Okay, so again, 216, we already know that's 2 to the third and then 3 to the third, isn't it? So let me just rewrite it as 216 to the 1/3. Well, this is same thing as cube root of 216, which was 2 to the third, 3 to the third. So which is just 2 times 3, which is 6. Okay, so let's plug that in. So now we have 36 minus 2 times 6, and then minus the 24. So now we have 36 minus 12 minus the 24. And 36 minus 12 is 24. Yes, and then minus 24 gives us 0, which checks up with this 0. Good. All right, so therefore, our solution set is negative 64 and 216. We get to keep them both. So let's box that for the answer. When I first learned this material, I was absolutely clueless. I had no idea how to make an equation that doesn't look anything quadratic into a quadratic equation. So that's the reason why I did everything step by step by step. But on the exam and such, you don't have to show me all these steps. But anyways, if you have any questions at all, please let me know. And great job, everyone.